Welcome back, everyone. You might say there is no comparison between two cities like Milwaukee and New York City, especially Manhattan. And of course, because they are fundamentally so very different, they offer such a different lifestyle. But I would say that's precisely the reason why the comparison is so interesting. So with that, let's go take a look. The comparison between Milwaukee and New York still seems a bit strange given the massive differences in size. But this is not about comparing two very unequal cities. It is about the different lifestyles that they can offer. So today I want to compare the two cities in 5 major categories, from climate to economy, and the last one is going to be cost of living. So if you're considering to move, stick around for that. And as a little bonus before the end of this video, if you're curious about what living in Milwaukee looks like, we will take a quick look at 3 very different neighborhoods here in Milwaukee. Before we get started, full disclosure, I live in Milwaukee, and as much as I love visiting New York, I have never actually lived there. But I've worked with a lot of clients from New York, and I'm always extremely curious as to why they have chosen to move to Milwaukee. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is based on their personal experience. New Yorkers seem to have a love-hate relationship with their city. They're always very passionate when they tell you about the energy and the fast pace of a city that never sleeps, the diversity of people, which is also reflected in a very cosmopolitan lifestyle, an incredible variety of food and restaurants, and never-ending selection of arts, culture, history, and entertainment, most of it within the convenience of walking distance, or at the most a short ride with a very efficient public transportation system. On the other hand, New York is also very loud and congested. It is often dirty and smelly, especially in the summer. It feels crowded on the streets, apartments are tiny, and commuting anywhere by car can feel like an expedition. When it comes to work, people often talk about a glorified hustle culture and the lack of any sort of work-life balance, about homeless people sleeping on the streets, how blunt New Yorkers can be, and how insanely expensive everything is, from rent to taxes. So there is a lot to talk about here. Let me get started by saying that Milwaukee is not what it was 40 years ago in the 80s. It has changed a lot over the last decades. The days of declining manufacturing are long gone, and Milwaukee has been quietly reinventing itself. So much so that in 2018, Vogue magazine called it the Midwest's coolest and most underrated city. We did our best to work out the main differences between living in New York and living in Milwaukee, supported by data, but I'm sure you may not agree with everything, and I would love to hear more about your personal experience living in either city down in the comment section below. So let's get started with number 1. Milwaukee is located on the shore of Lake Michigan, which is one of the largest freshwater bodies in the world, and it looks very much like an ocean. Milwaukee is also about 170 miles further north than New York, about the same as Boston, and that makes a difference for the climate. Both cities have full 4 seasons. The difference is that Milwaukee's winter is generally a bit longer, it can bring more snow, and it can also get colder. However, most people use their cars and rarely ever walk, which makes winter a lot less of a pedestrian experience in Milwaukee than it is in New York. Summers, on the other hand, are really great in Milwaukee, as it does not get as hot and sticky as it does in New York sometimes. Temperatures are usually very pleasant, between 75 and 85 degrees, with very few really hot and humid days. Lake Michigan's huge body of water tends to moderate summer temperatures, and it's always cooler by the lake. In fact, many of the homes along the shoreline don't even have air conditioning. Fall is one of the best seasons in Milwaukee. The weather is usually dry and mild until early November, and generally outside of an occasional thunderstorm in the summer or a snowstorm in the winter, Milwaukee does not see a lot of extreme weather. The economy and population of New York are obviously a lot bigger. With over 19.3 million people, it is one of the largest metro areas in the US, right before LA. The Milwaukee metro area is much smaller, but with about 1.6 million people, it still ranks number 40 out of 100 in the US by population. New York's economy is massive. It is home to 54 Fortune 500 companies, and the global economic output of the metro area is about $1.33 trillion, or about 1,330 billion. If New York were a country, it would rank number 13 in the world by economic output. Milwaukee is of course many times smaller in comparison. It is home to 6 Fortune 500 companies, and the total GDP of the area is about $102 billion. Lower Manhattan is home to the New York Stock Exchange and the Nasdaq, representing the world's 2 largest stock exchanges and making the securities industry one of the primary economic engines. Milwaukee has a very diverse economy with no single dominating sector. The biggest sectors are healthcare, manufacturing, trade, research, and education. New York offers a huge amount of job opportunities. However, if you're looking for a job, that also means there is a huge amount of competition. As of October 2022, the unemployment rate in New York has been 4.5% compared to 3.6% in Milwaukee. The job market in New York is also cutthroat in a way that we don't see it in Milwaukee, especially in higher paying jobs. The expectation is to work a lot more than 40 hours per week, and work-life balance is practically non-existent. That doesn't mean that you don't have to work hard in Milwaukee if you want to be successful, but people in Milwaukee tend to focus a bit more on work during the colder season, but usually make up for it in the summer when social life and recreation take a front seat. Compared to the city that never sleeps, Milwaukee's downtown area is also a lot slower paced. The difference is very visible when you walk or drive in the downtown area. Traffic is usually light and parking is comparatively abundant and inexpensive, which gets us to the next topic. The size and density of New York have also drawbacks. Longer commute times are one of them. New York is a pedestrian city. Traffic is legendary and probably the worst in the country. You have to go to Home Depot for a few parts. We'll see you back in 5 hours. On the other hand, New York has one of the best public transportation systems. Even though it is dirty and often reeks, people walk a lot, especially in Manhattan, but you first have to get there. Parking is also often a challenge and quite expensive. No surprise, a lot of people will opt out of owning a vehicle and use public transportation instead. Traffic is actually relatively light in Milwaukee compared to a lot of big cities in the US. Most of Milwaukee's suburbs were developed after the 1950s, so already with cars in mind. Milwaukee is half-jokingly known as a 20-minute city because you can get anywhere in usually under 20 minutes. The city planners have done a very good job with the freeway system. It is very easy to get around, quick to get downtown or out into the more rural areas. Parking is usually readily available and inexpensive, even downtown. Most people in Milwaukee have at least one car and they use it every day. Running errands by car, especially in the winter, also means that you don't need to bundle up as much for the cold weather while you're walking or waiting for public transportation. Speaking of that, Milwaukee does not have a subway system. The downtown area is now served by a brand new streetcar called the Hop, as well as several bus lines. Getting out of the city is quick and easy. If you need some outdoor time and you want to go for a hike in a state park or spend some time on one of the many inland lakes, Milwaukee has a lot of options that are within about half an hour drive from the downtown area. If you like to travel for work or for business and you need an airplane to get there, New York has of course an advantage. The 3 major airports offer 252 non-stop flights to destinations in the US and 79 other countries all over the world. Milwaukee has a much smaller airport and offers direct flights to only 31 destinations in the US, Canada, and the Caribbean. One of them is to New York, and there is actually several direct flights every day. It takes about 2.5 hours to get to New York. What helps a lot is that we have one of the largest US airports close by, and that is Chicago O'Hare. It takes only a little over an hour by car to get there, which makes it a convenient alternative if you want to avoid a layover. In terms of culture, art, nightlife, and entertainment, not many cities in the world can keep up with New York. But that does not mean you are going to get bored in Milwaukee. With about 1.6 million people, it is still big enough that it offers a fair amount of culture and entertainment. Especially in the summer, we have at least one major festival almost every weekend. And Milwaukee is also host of the world's largest music festival, the Summerfest. It usually attracts close to 1 million visitors every year. So while you're probably not running out of things to do here, but if nightlife and clubs are high on your priority list, Milwaukee may not be your jam. For the occasional itch, Chicago is actually a fantastic weekend getaway. Some people say Chicago offers about 80% of New York, but at half the cost. I'm not sure if that is factually correct, but I'm sure you get the idea. When it comes to food, New York is simply unmatched in its diversity of international cuisines. But fortunately for me, Milwaukee has a lot more to offer than just beer, cheese, and brats. For its size, Milwaukee has a surprisingly good food and restaurant scene, as I can personally confirm as a very passionate foodie. You will find plenty of options all the way from taco trucks to fine dining. And if you do like beer and bars, you definitely came to the right place. Milwaukee has the second highest bar density per capita in the nation, second only to New Orleans. And if you prefer spending your time outdoors, Wisconsin has certainly a lot to offer, but you should know the area around Milwaukee is relatively flat. So if you like mountains or skiing, you are a little bit out of luck here and may need to fly out west. One of the biggest differences between Milwaukee and New York is population density. A square mile in the Milwaukee metro area is typically home to about 1,560 people, while New York packs a staggering 17,800 into the same space. New York's population density is possible because of its many mid- and high-rise buildings. New York consists mostly of multifamily structures. Only 10% of all units are single-family homes. Very different picture in Milwaukee. Almost 70% of all properties are single-family homes, and almost all of them come with a backyard and a garage. Let's talk about migration trends. New York is the state with the fourth highest outbound migration in the US, right behind New Jersey, California, and Illinois. The main reason why people are leaving are the skyrocketing rents, high cost of living, and high taxes. New Yorkers love moving to warmer weather, so foremost Florida destinations, followed by Philadelphia, Boston, and Washington, D.C. Wisconsin has historically not seen a large amount of inbound migration, but it is getting more attention lately for a number of reasons. The latest U-Haul migration report ranks Wisconsin number 13 in a national comparison. And one of the reasons has to do with cost of living, quality of living, but Milwaukee is also increasingly considered a climate change safe haven with plenty of fresh water, a moderate climate, and very rare extreme weather events. And maybe it has also to do with the people and the culture. You may have heard the phrase Midwest friendly, and that is actually a real thing. This is often one of the first things people from New York mention to me when I ask them about Milwaukee. New Yorkers tend to be a lot more, well, let's call it blunt in their communication. Frankly, you get used to Midwest friendly very easy, and it sometimes amazes me how big of a deal it is to some clients, because I can always think of some unfriendly people around here, but I guess everything is relative. So people tend to be a little bit more relaxed around here, and maybe this has also something to do with our next topic. Let's talk about income first. Wages are generally higher in New York, but the difference is smaller than you might expect. The median household income in New York is $81,951, and in Milwaukee $63,739, which is about 22% less. However, the overall cost of living in New York is about twice as expensive. Housing is the biggest contributor at about 453% more. Transportation is 77% more. Utilities 48% more. Healthcare 37% more. And food and groceries about 25% more. The apartment rental market in New York is very competitive and famously expensive. A median 2-bedroom apartment in New York will cost you currently about $4,420 per month compared to $1,272 in Milwaukee. Moving is also more expensive in New York because on top of rent and security deposit, you will have to pay a broker fee of usually 1 month rent, while in Milwaukee you do have to set up your own appointment with the owner or the property manager, but that also means no brokerage fee. Buying a home in New York is difficult and almost 4 times more expensive than Milwaukee. In New York, you have to budget currently about $805,000 for a median home compared to $220,000 in Milwaukee. An average New York home will cost more than a luxury mansion in Milwaukee. Anything over $600,000 is considered luxury here, and less than 2% of all homes are priced over $1 million. Taxes are another big pain point. Property taxes are relatively high in Milwaukee because it is the only form of municipal taxation. Sales tax is quite low in Wisconsin, only 5.6% in Milwaukee, compared to New York City sales and use tax of almost 8.9%. New York has the overall highest tax burden in the nation, which is probably one of the reasons why Florida is so popular. According to the Tax Foundation, the overall tax burden for New York is 15.9%, which is about 11.2% above national average and by far the highest in the country. Wisconsin comes in quite a bit lower at 10.9%. So there you have it. If you have more questions about the cost of living in Milwaukee, I have made an entire video on the topic, and here's a link if you want to see that one next. Earlier in the video, I promised a quick review of 3 very different Milwaukee neighborhoods. So in the next 60 seconds, you can get a sense of what living in Milwaukee actually looks like. The historic 3rd Ward is part of the older downtown area in Milwaukee and one of the trendiest places to live if you enjoy being close to the water, prefer a condo lifestyle, and enjoy being in walking distance to great shops and restaurants. Shorewood is a very interesting mix of urban and suburban neighborhoods on Milwaukee's North Shore, with a lot of beautiful residential homes dating back to the early 1900s. Shorewood offers a fair amount of nightlife, but it is also close enough to downtown, and it is very popular with families. Mequon is an example of a suburban neighborhood. Homes are generally larger, newer, and built on lots that are at least 1 to 3 acres big. Commute time to downtown Milwaukee is typically about 25 minutes. I know this very well because that's where I live. Let me get back to a comparison. Both cities can offer a very different lifestyle, and it really comes down to personal preferences. My personal take is that while New York is absolutely fascinating, I do like the size and somewhat smaller pace of Milwaukee. It feels more manageable and it has everything I would expect from a city, yet it is still small enough to get around quickly. I'm probably a bit biased towards Milwaukee, and if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments below. If you're interested to see more about Milwaukee's neighborhoods, you could find a lot of them on my YouTube channel, and you can click right on the link here on your screen. If you're thinking about moving to Milwaukee, definitely check out our website, onpointrg.com, and download our free relocation guide with a ton of information about Milwaukee. You can also sign up for access to the Milwaukee MLS system and start looking at properties like a pro. That's all I had for you today. Please give this video a quick like if you found it interesting. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.